All right, everybody, welcome to this new episode of the Hammers and Dice podcast. It has been a little while since we recorded, and we actually have all five of us here for the first time in a
Woo!
while.
Woo!
Uh, so let's dive right into it. We're going to be talking today about the Las Vegas Open, all the heresy goodness there. Thankfully, one of our members, Reed, actually ran the event, so we have an insider's look at how everything went down. But before we get into that, there were a lot of really cool heresy releases in the last 2 months. I feel like, we had such a long dry spell, and then we just had this like nonstop resin model release one after the next, and like I like them all actually. Honestly, like I'm really happy with, a lot of them are not necessarily models that I need for my stuff, but just like knowing they exist makes me happy. You know?
Yeah, not gonna lie, the Trader Herald was really calling to me as far as like kind of one of their like best sculpts I've seen in a long time. The Loyalist one wasn't thrilling me exactly with it, so I think the Trader was spot on.
So my tinfoil hat theory on the trader one is that's the new Mark IV armor that we're gonna get because they're gonna
Yeah,
with the helmet change because it's gonna they're
I
trying
thought the
my
same
guess
thing.
is they're gonna distance themselves from the Primaris Mark X, which is the old Mark IV, to that new Mark IV, the destroyer style helmet.
Yeah, where it's like
Oh, you know.
and it doesn't have the ridges of like the grade,
Yeah.
whatever. Yeah, I think that's a
Well,
cool
and
look.
that's a very Sons of Horus look if you
Yep.
look at their like upgrade kit.
Hmm.
And I think that's
It
been something
is,
they've been
yeah.
doing just generally this edition, besides the Mark VI, which is the iconic Beaky Moraine, but the Mark III definitely changed their helmet style.
Hmm.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
I still like the old plastic kit because it has just such a heavier look. I mean, it definitely screams Iron Warrior a bit too much, but it still is. It was nice because of how flat the plate was and how robust it seemed. Not to say that the new Mark III helmet doesn't look robust. It just looks a little too Mark II almost, if that's a thing.
I think
I
like
feel you on that, Esteban.
yeah,
I think I'd agree.
I think like if I was to create my perfect Mark III model, it would actually be the old heads because I kind of like how flat and like menacing they looked with the new bodies. So I mean, you could totally do that if you had enough Mark III
Yeah.
heads around. So I'm like, I'm not in love with the Mark III kit, but I like can see how I can fix it to be more to my own taste. But for that Herald, that Chaos Herald, or sorry, the Trader Herald, it's like the perfect middle ground from like what felt like Chaos Marines in like third or fourth edition of like 40K and like Chaos Marines or Trader Marines in Heresy right now. So I thought it was like, wow, this is the late era Trader Herald, and I thought it was so cool. Like it feels like it's really bridging the gap between like, yeah, this is how a Trader Marine should look like by the end of the Heresy, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that axe is beautiful.
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, like
It
want that
is.
axe.
Oh
Now,
yeah, no, he.
Loyalist one. Mm.
I mean, the loyalist one, I don't mind it. I mean, like, I know there were a lot of people being online being like, "Oh, the flag's so small," but like, they're going for like a Roman centurion style look, which, like, it's if
Sure.
you're doing like
I
open,
also
like, it can work.
I also really like the bionic foot. I think it's a cool touch as like a veteran who's carrying the Legion standard.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think it kind of looks like I'm like, okay, well that's I don't know. It should be more striking than that. I mean, like it's the same stats as a Legion standard, like all around. So I want it to feel as like insane as like the new Legion Command Squad bits that they have, but just
Yeah,
feels a little small.
It's
Yeah,
just
it
one
feels like
arm
the
swap,
the
one
the
arm swap
person
away
that your
from
girl
being that
tells
good.
you.
yeah.
So
I mean,
sorry,
I
Reed.
honestly, I would be tempted to take this and use it as a Vexilla
I fully
um,
The squad.
for like a jump squad or something. Like, I don't know.
The actually the dream, here we go. The dream is to make a command squad with all the consoles. And this is this is the banner guy.
the most
Like,
expensive command squad you have ever looked at.
Yes.
it's for when you
They're
want
going
to
to be
style
decked
on your
out though.
opponents and say, "I have this much money to spend on heresy."
Yeah.
If this is what my command squad looks like, imagine what else I brought. This is the style points. This is the equivalent
Mhm.
of foiling out your deck in Magic.
Yes.
What'd you guys think of the new Space Wolves? I guess librarian. I don't know what they call it for Space Wolves.
The caster of ruin.
Stormcaller?
Caster of
Oh,
Runes,
Caster
whichever it
Yeah.
is. But I think it looks good. I think it's like, um, I mean, like I feel like Space Wolves just have so many options as far as like taking their 40K bits. That's obviously for Primaris and everything like that. So take that with a grain of salt. But
Yeah.
I think it's a really good model. I think the head's really excellent.
Yeah, I think they've done a good job of dialing back the wolfiness in the new Space Wolves models. I think they've heard the critiques. And
Well,
like,
I was gonna say he's also got that Mark IV style helmet. Now that I look at him, I mean, it looks like a weird combination of the Destroyer helmet with a bit of Mark V, Heresy style with to it.
Yeah, I
yeah,
could.
I honestly don't know. I guess it's technically Mark 6 because the backpack looks Mark 6,
Oh,
but it
sure.
does look like a kind of weird combination of like three different armor marks.
Yeah, because the knees the right knee is definitely Mark IV, but the left is definitely Mark 6, and then he's got the exposed cabling on the upper, so that's what makes me think it's supposed to be Mark 5.
Well, maybe
That
it's
or
like late heresy putting together armor marks.
But that cabling is
yeah,
very like that's like all librarians kind of have that cabling. That's like a I don't know why, but that's like a
Like it
cycle.
could probably.
no, I get it.
But they're not psychers.
No, I do agree with you. Though they did. They're overcorrecting from those original wolf helmets, but I think they've been doing a good job. Like anything that comes out for Space Wolves, I'm kind of like, yeah. Besides those really goofy ass like wolf helmets, I actually think all those Space Wolf stuff looks pretty cool.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Actually, I think he actually would also make a decent herald because even the little wolf symbol on top, you just trim the middle section in between and put a banner with that on top of it. This would look like a great herald. Like
Yeah,
he's there too, honestly.
fully agree.
Honestly, you don't even need a banner. Like I think that you could just be like, yeah, this is my, you know, Herald. Like
No,
the
no.
Ultramarines, like Herald model doesn't have a banner. His like it's just like the metal like pieces. Um, Remus Montanus,
Right,
Yeah, I
right.
see what you mean. Yeah, yeah,
so
yeah.
like
Not a
Yeah, the
flag.
old Remus Ventan.
Yeah.
so it doesn't necessarily have to be a banner. It could be, just something representative of the Legion, which, that kind of is.
Giant
Um,
wolf head, yes.
you guys have a preference between the Iron Hands and the Iron Warriors models?
Dude, the Iron Warriors Praetor is the coolest Praetor in a long time. And
And
I don't even play Iron Warriors. Like this model is so cool. It's so beefy. Freaking hammers is bigger than his face, you know? Yeah.
Oh yeah.
and of course they got two poses for it too, which is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I love the
Yeah.
alternative head with the like pilot helmet, like little thing. It just looks so cool. It's the helmet, or sorry, the hammer is ridiculous, but I
Yeah.
love the
I mean, this is, I think, the f first Cataphracti new scale HQ they've released.
No, Marduk Cedros was released, so he's also new scale catapracty.
Is he
So
Cataphracti? Marduk
yeah,
Cedric. Oh, you're right.
yeah.
You're right. The Dark
And
Angels guy.
and then wasn't
Right.
the Praetor from the Iron from not the Iron Hands, the Imperial Fists in Cathonia also in catapracty?
oh yeah, yeah. Was
Oh,
that
that's right.
Guard
Yeah, yeah.
Gav
So I guess I missed the special characters, but we got this generic dude.
yeah, as far as
Yeah,
actually,
it's
yeah.
like one shave or two from being like a generic Praetor, which is super cool.
Yeah, you just got to basically do an arm swap and take
Yeah,
off the.
Mm,
so cool.
that
I don't know.
hammer
He
big?
his leather strapping just screams Iron Warrior to me, honestly, and plus his belt buckle there. I mean, he literally comes off as an Iron Warrior. I don't think you could convert this without really scraping off a lot of details on
I would
this.
just scrape the belt, and then I think a paint job will go a long way of making him not just Iron Warriors.
Well, you'll have a chance to prove it, John. You'll have to get
All right,
one
let's do it.
and show us
Let's do
how.
it.
Show us how
Team
it's
Green,
done.
here we go.
And then like the Iron Hand one is pretty cool too. I mean, this one I think would be even harder to convert to anything else, just because it's got Iron Hand stuff like all over it. Although I guess you could like run it as like a Praevian
Hmm.
for another Legion. Like that would probably work.
Raven or a Forge Lord? Because I
Yeah.
think
Lord,
if
yeah.
you swap the head and backpack, because I think the backpack has some iconography on its back end with the regular backpack, you might be able to get away with it. And maybe just green stuff the belt buckle with like a skull to be just general mechanicum.
Yeah.
It
Agreed.
would be it would be tough though.
I like it. I don't love it. I mean, maybe it's just because I never cared too much for Iron Hands that much, but I think they could have gone a little bit crazier after looking at the Iron Warriors one, who I don't care about Iron Warriors really, but that Praetor's awesome. Looking at this guy, looking at the Iron Hands one, still not fully convinced that it's the coolest guy, but
It's the
His
hammer. It's
mechadendrites are cool.
100% the hammer that makes the Iron Warrior better,
yeah,
honestly.
for sure. What
Yeah.
can I say? I'm a sucker for a good hammer, you know?
Or get the brutal too, guys. Just saying.
I mean, this is Warhammer after all, you
It's
know,
just the
Wow.
in the
yeah.
name.
But you know what? I really do like the two overseers, honestly, because I don't think if I buy them, I'll ever use them as overseers because they just look like great conversion material for making a praetor or even like a champion or something because they just look so extra that they look like they would be better for those roles than as overseers, honestly.
I mean, they
The
both look like
loyalist one
great
gives me
chaplains.
chaplain. Yeah, chaplain vibes, right? For the loyalist one.
Yeah.
The Traitor one is so clearly created to be a word bearer. It's insane.
As soon as I saw that, I'm like, why did they not paint that thing word bearers?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's to match like in the book. This is what the one. I think John, you even mentioned this. in
Yeah,
one of our
yeah.
previous
Yeah, there's a piece
podcasts
of
or
art.
something.
Yeah, with that one guy.
Yeah, there's a piece of art in the Beta Garmin book that you were spot on. I think with this one.
Mm-hmm.
But
I mean,
honestly,
it's awesome. I think it's so cool. It goes alongside what I was saying earlier, where I'm like the Chaos Herald or the Traitor Herald, and this Traitor Overseer, like they're perfect. They're like late era, look evil, like as evil as it comes, kind of traitor, like Praetor is or Centurion ish characters, and I think that's so cool. Like that's exactly what I was looking for, like with the old characters.
yeah. Honestly, even like the loyalist overseer, I'm like, that would be actually perfect for like the Emperor's children.
Oh, I didn't think about that.
Yeah, I could totally see that.
Definitely. He's kind of a little ostentatious, so he's kind of got like all that bling on his chest.
Yeah, I got purple. You're good to go.
Hmm.
Because I feel like there's a few loyalist legions where that's like too much bling for them.
Yeah. I'm also really, really into all the like the heads that they provide you with both of them because I'm like,
Yeah.
if even if you don't end up using like, oh, I prefer the beaky head or I prefer the unhelmeted head, both of them are great bits to always have. Like all of these heads are the kind of things where I would like treasure to give another sergeant or someone cool in my army, like a head swap, just to like
Right.
have extra like cool factor. And like that's something that's really cool on all these new Centurions.
Agreed. Yeah.
Agreed.
Nothing wrong with adding to the bits box.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Maybe the bits box gets a little too big sometimes. But
No such thing.
yeah.
And then also there was the surprise drop at LVO of the Thanatar Calyx. Is that John, is that a good option? I don't know.
Yeah, this guy's okay. If you play Mechanicum, addendum to our podcast about building a mech army, like buy
Which
this
if you
and
haven't
the
watched
plasma
it,
guy.
go watch it.
Yeah, go watch it. But add this guy because this guy is super strong.
Yeah, buy one of each. His plasma brother and then him together. Just
Mhm.
chef's kiss. You've got everything you need to deal with everyone.
What is it,
You
like
really do.
a AP1 las cannon or something?
With armored
Okay,
bane.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
give it everything.
And it has that one rule where if you pen a vehicle, they snap shoot, regardless if they're a
Shock
warhound.
pulse.
They shock pulse. So
Yeah, it also affects dreadnoughts, so even better.
it does affect dreadnoughts.
Make your opponent very sad as their guns no longer shoot well.
Yeah, I mean the fact that it affects dreadnoughts is that's beautiful.
It's like I'm super happy that's coming out in plastic. Like I think it totally deserves it. Was I a little bit like wanting just one more kit from LVO? Yeah, I won't lie. I was a bit bummed, but you know what? Adepticon's probably. I'm sure. Like, in no time I'll be watching the Adepticon stream, and I'm sure I'll get something cool there. But
Yeah, I met with you. Like Age of Sigmar had the vampires release. 40K had Emperor's Children, which is super cool. And then here was a robot that you already know exists. Hooray!
And not only that, I think the old world had a lot of kind of
Yeah.
promise with like what's coming back, and then like it kind of felt with us, it was like, here, by the way, and like somebody mentioned
Yeah,
it on this, it's like we didn't even get it in the trailer. Like it was just like, hey, by the way, here it is online, and it's like you already kind of knew this was
Dude,
coming with your.
For real, they sneaky announce cafe, and then here's a robot.
yeah,
I'm sorry, I'm kind of
Yeah.
salty about this thing. Even though I love it, even though I own two fully painted, and I love them
I
on
mean,
the table.
yeah.
But
But like wasn't even tuning into the preview because I knew I was like Heresy was not one of the things they said was going to get any releases at all for LVO. It was like the one big name that wasn't in like the graphics for it. So I was like, oh, we're not getting anything. So when I saw that, I was like, oh, well, we got something. You know?
Yeah,
Um,
they exist.
Please, sir, may we have some more?
yeah.
You could say that you could convert a lot of those Emperor's Children into like a real late Heresy era Emperor's Children. So we didn't quite get too much, but there's some play with those Emperor's Children models, I'm sure.
Yeah,
I
Can
think
I
they're
ask what you
trying to
guys
lure
think of
back.
Fulgrim,
oh, let's talk
the
about
40K
Fulgrim.
Fulgrim? Yeah,
Oh,
so I
yeah.
mean, like, let's talk about so like my idea, like when I heard that they were doing a 40K plastic Fulgrim, I was like, okay, but why did we just get a 30K one in the same kind of vein? And like I hear it, and like I kind of understanding it more. It's like definitely more of the chaosified, like 10,000 years later version. I still don't see why it couldn't play though
Oh, it definitely
as
could.
the
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
Yeah,
So I
I've
don't
said
know. I just wanted to
before, I'm
ask.
like, just from like an aesthetic wise view, I like the Forge World model better. But if I was going to run a demonic fulcrum, I'd 100% get the plastic one.
Yeah.
Just
you
get
can
that.
run Demonic
Like
Fulgrim, not and win.
it's not worth the money and like the pain in the ass of those resin wings.
Yeah.
Well, can I? I guess what why I was like why I was confused about this is because the artwork for Siege of Terra shows shows three of the Primarchs. It's Angron, it's Mortarion, and it's Magnus. Like Fulgrim, I think is the only one who doesn't get shown off, and Magnus is 1-to-1 with his 40K model.
Yeah.
Fulgrim, I mean, Mortarion is 1-to-1 with his 40K model.
Yeah.
Specifically, I'm thinking of the Warhawk
Yeah,
Yeah.
the
intro
cover.
Oh yeah.
and then like Angron is the only one. Like when I heard like we're getting a 30K Angron, I was like, yeah, okay, that makes kind of sense. I mean, like he might have different weapons, but like his 40K incarnation seems fairly accurate even for Heresy. So like hearing that Fulgrim was going to get two, I was like, kind of what gives is that does that mean that we're going to get 30K versions for all of them? When I'm like, and I'm kind of thinking that might not be necessary for all of them.
Yeah.
I do think that it's their way because regardless of whether or not you think it's a good business decision, which I'm not so sure it is, like they seem to be trying really hard to separate the different game systems and what you're buying for what. So like they seem to want to know like who's buying things for Heresy versus 40K.
Yeah.
Like the only real crossover list is like the Custodians, and even that is not like not everything is legal in both systems.
Demons, you could say, are crossover. You could run a Demons of the Runestorm list in 40K and 30K, but
Yeah, but that's like a
But I will
PDF
say for
format,
demons, that's a PDF.
Yeah.
yeah.
It's not even like a legit army in that way.
Yeah, same
It's
for
kind of like saying
militia.
like I can run the Imperial, I can run the Guard. Yeah, exactly with the militia, but it's not kind of the sanctioned, well played kind of army.
I do have to, I mean, like maybe I think a little bit less of like GW strategy and like how they release things, but I think that this is a perfect example of like I think like even though Forge World is technically not around anymore, it's just under the GW umbrella. I think this was probably some late era Forge World build, and they were like, "Well, we have this on the docket. We finished it." And they're like, "Well, we were already going to do Fulgrim," so they're like, "Well, we're not just going to throw away both of these." So they just put both of them out for no reason because now I can't imagine that the Forge World Fulgrim's sales won't completely tank because, yeah, as cool as I think the Forge World version is, I'm not putting that thing back together when its spear breaks or when the wing snaps, like you were saying. But you know what I would do is fix the plastic one that I spent probably like what $150 at worst on like versus like $300, I'm sure, whatever they're gonna want for Fulgrim from I don't know how much he costs for the Forgeable version, but like I'm saying, he's way more expensive, way more fragile.
Yeah, I
And
mean, when we were at the Palm Springs Open last year, like, and we've talked about this before, but like one of the guys there, Nick, brought Fulcrum Transfigured, and like I don't think he made it through a full game without breaking. Like by the end of the
Jeez.
tournament, he was using a pie plate to represent him on the table
Yeah.
because he just like was sick of trying to put him back together again. And I'm
Yeah.
like, when you have a model that's unplayable, like, what's the point? You know?
Don't say that to any of the people who own Warlords. But you know what? I think there is a little bit of reason to the madness, and the thing I'm thinking is GW needed to get rid of the resin, as Beto was talking about, but also the plastic is now basically a pseudo upgrade for the resin version. Because my guess is those wings probably attach in a similar method as the resin ones. So everyone who's sick of the broken wings or sick of the broken spears, look, here's your plastic fixer kit. Go grab this, pin it on, and it's lighter. It won't break every time. That's probably what their mindset is hey, people will buy this to fix the resin one.
Maybe.
Eventually.
I'm gonna take a more pessimistic stance. I think the teams didn't talk. Both teams
Yeah,
separately made a full grim and like, oh, awkward moment where it's like, I got a full grim. Well, I got a full grim.
I fully agree with exactly what I
Yeah.
we're both designing one. They both got orders from the HQ, and HQ never told either of the departments that both of them were working on it. And then all of a sudden they're like, "What do you mean you were working on Fulgrim? We were working on Fulgrim." And then they're like,
Okay,
"Oh,
but like let's not get this wrong though. Like since Magnus came out, everyone has had the intention that eventually all the Demon Primarchs were going to get plastic. And
Mhm.
Mortarion came out and everyone was like, all right, it's just a matter of time till we get Angron and Fulgrim. Angron came out and everyone was like, hell yes, okay, Fulgrim is the last, like
I mean,
of the
Fulgrim
demon aligned.
Fulgrim and plastic has been going around for years or for a while now. Everyone was talking about who would come out first, Angron or Fulgrim. When Angron came out, everyone was like, "All right, there it is. It's 3-on-2 now with Lion. We got to get number 4." And it was just like a countdown. So
but
probably it was inevitable, and the resin might have, like as John was saying, just the teams didn't communicate, or maybe even more funnily, someone said, "Hey, look, this is my homework. Copy it, but don't make sure you change a few things."
I mean,
but but the thing is, like, I want you guys to remember that like a running joke before was that like Slanesh and Fulgrim and all those models were kind of on the chopping block of if GW was gonna continue it, because if you remember in like after like
AOS.
oh yeah, like code like Chaos 3.5 or whatever in third edition, those Demonette models caused a huge controversy in like the game. So ever since that point, all of Slanesh was kind of this like, all right, we're gonna tread lightly with it. Like even when Age of Sigmar launched, Slanesh was not in Age of Sigmar.
Mhm.
Remember, like it was
And they
kind of
got rid of Slanesh for Archeon's model as they were going into the
Yeah,
end time.
Slanesh was not in
So
the lore. He
it
was
was a
trapped.
huge deal that people were like, "Oh my god, it might not be here anymore."
exactly. So there was the talk of like, okay, when they put out like Magnus and Mortarion, I'm like, okay, you know what, like that's awesome. But I still wasn't convinced we were gonna get at least Fulgrim. I thought Fulgrim was the one where I'm like, I wouldn't be surprised if Slanesh kind of gets thrown a little under the rug from now on. So like seeing this plastic Fulgrim is like, whoa. And like unlike the rest of the Primarchs, I feel like we already really, really knew what like a Demon Prince version of Fulgrim looked like. Like prior to like the novels and the images and the visions of heresy, like it was pretty well known that Fulgrim was like the snake guy. Versus like if you would have asked me what Angron looked like as a demon prince like 10 years ago, I would have been like, he's just mad and kind of a demon, like I didn't know, but we've always known what Fulgrim looked like. So it was so weird that Fulgrim was this last one, even though everyone could have told you 10, 15 years ago exactly what Fulgrim kind of looked like. And so I don't know.
and the thing that like I still scratch my head over is why, and this goes back to like the GW, if it's like who's really running the show with Heresy in terms of what models get released and the schedule or
Mhm.
whatever. Because I'm like, we've had rules for Lorgar Transfigured since the very beginning of the edition. Like, if there was gonna be a prime, like a transfigured Primarch to get a model, why wouldn't you do Fulgrim first instead of rushing out a very poorly edited book with like Emperor's Children, corrupted rules that nobody likes. Um, you
Yeah, because
know.
they're not fun. It's not even like rule of cool. Like it's not cool. It's not fun.
Yeah, bad, just bad.
So like that's my question. I'm like, what was the thought process with that? I don't know. Um, Not that I don't like the model. It's an amazing model that I would never purchase and I would never try to paint or put together. I admire
Because
it
it's
from
almost
a
like trying
distance.
to like buy if the Hobbit had this like really great Smaug
Oh yeah,
model
Oh
that
yeah.
was like amazing, and it was like You know what? I'd buy that just to put it on my shelf. But the idea of trying to take that Smaug model and trying to play with it sounds like a nightmare.
Yeah,
And it
complete.
feels almost kind of like in a similar vein.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is smart because then you have your transfigured as your display piece that you keep at home, and you get to be like, wow, what a beautiful model. And then you have your current 40K one that you're like, okay, if I actually want to play with Fulgrim, I'll just bring this model.
Mhm.
I think ultimately the present Fulgrim is I think a legacy of the Forge World mindset where Forge World will do the thing because they can,
Mhm.
regardless of like market research or logic in the game development. It's like, oh yeah, we can make a Fulgrim, why not? I mean, if you look at the really popular Forge World creations like Red Scorpions, even like Carcharodons and all that, a lot of them were just personal armies of Forge World employees that you just decided to sculpt models for. Like, hey, here's like Carib Colm the Leviathan. Cool. So yeah, it just gives you that vibe of like it just makes no sense. Doesn't relate to any game logic release of like, yeah, Lorgar transfigured as a model. Why release Fulgrim with this half-assed book? Well, because we can. And
Um,
people will buy it. People bought it, right?
what's the difference in their weapons? Do they have the same weapons on both of them?
They
So
both.
the rumor is right now that the 40K Fulgrim has one of the Eldar Crone swords.
Yeah.
Now that might have been disproven since I initially read that, but like it sounds like a cool idea because there's one Crone sword missing for the Eldar to get before they can resurrect their death god Need.
My guess is that's
And
probably true because they're also releasing all the Eldar like
Yeah, that's right.
Oh, so
guys
true.
now too. So like
Mm.
my guess is they're probably working up to some kind of like Eldar v Slanesh thing in the
Mhm.
storyline. Uh,
which the final Crone sword was in the palace of Slanesh. Like they basically couldn't get to it. Like it was in an inaccessible point, so that the Eldar plotline has kind of died off since the resurrecting of Gilliman.
Yeah, I guess he also doesn't he the 40K one, he's holding like Ferrus Manus's sword, right, too?
Fireblade, yeah,
Oh,
Yeah.
Fireblade, yeah, he is. He
Like
is.
that's
yeah.
so cool. Like
That's
awesome.
super cool.
Yeah.
yeah. Um, okay, so let's move on to Era of Ruin. And
I
I'm very,
can't wait to read this.
yeah.
I've been like watching. I when it first got leaked that it was going to happen, I like watched a video in the behind the scenes, like where somebody talking about like, all right, this author talks about these things based on the title. We can kind of guess that it's maybe this. I'm hyped. I'm ready
Yeah.
for it.
That cover art is amazing
The
too.
Warhounds, yeah.
The two warhounds just like standing on the like plinth.
One of the
Yeah,
best covers since probably End of the Death Volume 1, like easily. Like I love to see those like big throne room scenes, and
Yeah.
I'm not a huge fan of the End of the Death Part 1 and 2 covers, like great books, but the covers are always like, oh. But the cover of this one, it looks incredible.
Yeah.
so my biggest hype, well, couple things is ADB's finally writing again. It's been a while since we've
Mhm.
seen something around. And also the title, The Carrion Lord of the Imperium.
Oh
So
yeah.
the last time you hear that is, in the 40K rule books, there's that blurb when you open it.
Yeah.
So that I have it here. One of the quotes is he is the carrion lord of the Imperium for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day. I'm like, oh my gosh. If they end the series with this blurb or something similar, I will be like, okay, my hobby life is complete.
Just like slow clap. We finish
Low
the
club,
book.
yeah. It's like we're here.
The circle is complete.
It's like I'm happy they're doing it. I think it's so cool. I'm gonna read it, of course, in a second, but I am a little bit like sometimes the ones that are like a collection of short stories. Like I find myself like judging which one I like better, and in this like unhealthy way. So I'm like, oh, and then this one was better than this one, which I don't like about the short story collections
Yeah.
versus just
A lot of them are very hit and miss.
yeah.
Like
Anthologies are hard in that way, but it's like I think we'd be doing ourselves a disservice to just go in there and get a straight narrative at that point, because there's so many different facets that are happening as far as what's happening with the normal rank and file humans. Like I hope maybe one of them might throw us a bone, and like maybe we see a little bit more of Basilius Foe as like what happens with him. Not to spoil too much, but
Yeah.
um
Careful
I
with that
think that
territory. We might be spoiling it for people.
well, I mean, like I'm not saying much more, but it's like I think there's this issue like right now of like if we got one central narrative, it wouldn't be as kind of poignant as like getting to see from a bunch of different points of you know people reacting to the carnage and devastation, because like we also wanted to see like what the traders are feeling at this point,
Yeah.
not just the loyalists.
Yeah,
I mean,
some of the best parts of the last book were just seeing how the traders felt like after everything went down, and I would love to. I just want more background of stuff that wasn't quite as important. The last
Mhm.
three books felt like every single extremely important character had to get their, you know, every like moment in, and I would really love to hear about just like whatever mundane stuff after the after everything went down.
the Munitorum scribes who are like cowering in the
I've been
bunker.
wondering what happened to them.
Well, it's like it's kind of like that quote like Frodo has when like in the Return of the King. It's like, how do we go back and pick up the pieces after such like great horrors happen to us? Like I can only imagine like what they're going to describe at the siege after the siege of Terra of like trying to clean up the palace.
Yeah.
Hey man, as long as they end it with "In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war," we're good to go.
John is going to
No,
be so disappointed if that doesn't happen.
I know. I'm like, no, like, come on, guys. You had the
no,
perfect
no.
opportunity.
They're gonna end it with and Jagati Khan went to the webway to go find the 40,000 hammers to resurrect the Emperor of Mankind.
Oh
That's
my
how they
god.
wrap it up.
No, there's going to be a good
I already
20
was
bucks
going
before we
to
get to
look for
that
Eldar
point.
girlfriends.
Like,
I was there the day that Horus slew the Emperor.
Oh, I was
Uh,
there the day the Emperor slew Horus. That would be cool. I would accept that.
briefly before we do LVO, I just want to mention I made a journey to London a week and a half or so ago, and while I was there, decided to take the 3 hour drive to Nottingham and viewed Warhammer World. Um, I'm sure for anybody, I don't know if anybody watches this who's from the UK, but for the US listeners and people who haven't been to Warhammer World, it's pretty cool.
It's like
Definitely.
traveling to Mecca, from what I understand. Like I'm
Yeah.
sure it's like not
Pilgrimage.
as
Like every Warhammer fan must go at least once in their lifetime to
right.
the holy pilgrimage.
yeah, it's just really cool. Like the whole exhibition is huge. They've got like giant rooms where like each room has like displays from each of the different game systems. Obviously the Heresy stuff is cool. I was telling these guys before we started recording, there's like a Burning of Prospero display. There's a Cygnus Prime display. Um, there's a display between like it's like the uh, Sons of Horus fighting the Imperial Fists. I'm not sure what it's from, but it's all just like very cool. And they have like the traditional paint schemes for the legions, but they also have like a couple that like are like slightly different. I'm working on Emperor's Children. I was telling everyone before that like I had a paint scheme in mind that I was gonna do, and I saw this really cool paint scheme while I was there. I'm like, all right, I'm changing my mind. I'm gonna do this. Uh, so yeah, it was just like very like some really cool inspirational stuff to like kind of like get your hobby juices flowing. Um,
Very cool.
yeah,
Randy,
unfortunately,
are you gonna get Fulgrim transfigured, or are you gonna get 40K Fulgrim?
Yeah. Which one did you decide to pick up?
neither.
Yeah.
Oh.
If I do get Fulgrim at some point, it will be the pre-demon Fulgrim. Because his rules are better by a decent margin.
Hey, tell them what you picked up.
Oh yeah, so I've been wanting to at some point I wanted to get a Titan. I feel like that's like the hobby goal is for everyone to at least once time like build and paint a Titan, and that's something that I've always been like at some point I want to get a Warhound because that would just be like a fun, I mean probably not fun, excruciating challenge, but like you know, rewarding rewarding challenge when it's done. Um, and so, the nice thing is that even though the pound is more than the dollar, we pay 20% more because of the tariffs buying in the US than buying in the UK. Um, so when I went there, I like scoped out the pricing. Um, and it's like $200 cheaper to like buy it in the UK than it is here. Um, so I got the Titan. They actually like shipped it for free, so I didn't have to worry about it like transporting it through the airport and it breaking into a million pieces. Um, but yeah, so I bought my first and probably only Titan.
Don't say that.
You
There's,
say that, but
That's Twitter talk.
I went back to
Randy.
Yeah.
So
Do you
I
have
mean,
a
you just always have
Legio?
this recording to tell me how foolish I was in 10 years when I have like 15 Titan.
Randy, you have a kid. You know how the story goes. If you give a mouse a warhound, he'll ask for a reaver. If you give him a reaver, he'll ask for a warlord. If you ask for a warlord, he'll just start a whole new hobby alongside it because he might as well.
So
Randy, do you have a Legio picked out for your
no,
Titan?
I do not. I will have to do some research into that. If anyone has any suggestions, please let me
Do
know.
your own custom Legio and specifically make it yellow because yellow is the hardest color to
Do
paint.
the tiger ones with the flame
The,
tiger eyes
Fuarians, right?
variants, yeah.
those
Easy.
are yellow. Those are yellow.
Oh yeah, yellow with flames, even better.
Yeah, make
We're
the
not
hard
going to do that.
experience even harder for yourself. Do that one. Yeah.
I'm just gonna freehand a pinup girl on the side,
Yeah. Would you? I know that you've been always talking about doing a lot of freehanding.
Yeah, my specialty is freehand artwork on the side of my armor plates. No idea how long it's going to take me to do. I'll probably be having it sitting in a box for the next few months, judging me. But
1 year to LVO. You can do it. Remember,
yeah,
just like I
I've
told
told
John in his
everybody I'm going to try
Reaver.
to have it done. Unfortunately, I couldn't make it to LVO this year because also, like literally 3 days after I got back from London, it was my bachelor party. So I was partying in a cruise in Florida instead of in Vegas at LVO. But next year,
Dude, we could have thrown you an
hopefully.
awesome bachelor party at Vegas with LVO too. Like just as a just to think about next time for any of the other guys.
Next time I get married, we will do a LVO.
No, I wasn't going to say
No,
that. I
no,
wasn't
no,
going to say the next time around,
no.
Randy. I was going to say for the rest of the crowd.
Of course.
But
Tell
that's
you what, 5 year anniversary, 5 year anniversary. That's how we do it. We'll take you out to party.
a good anniversary or a good segue into Reed. What'd you
Yeah.
do this weekend?
So I mean, LVO was a great thing. I really obviously guys, I missed Esteban was the only one who was able to join us from Hammers and Dice, and like we missed the rest of you. Beto, I wasn't able to come over to the Star Wars Hall and see you. I wish I could. Alan came over and saw me, but I just never
Gone
felt like
away.
I was able to break away.
Yeah.
It was a really great event. I hope people had a really good time. And I'm excited to talk to you guys about it because I think there, obviously with any event, there's always things to improve. And I'm already taking my notes down of like, these are easy things that I can do for next year that will help streamline things and stuff like that. But I will say as well, like I'm happy with the data that I've been collecting as well. I've been trying to just do a lot of that at the moment. And I will say I'm a little burned out at the moment. But in the next couple of weeks, I'm going to come back to it and try to start digesting and trying to calculate, how many people have said the same kind of comment, like kind of stuff like that, and really know where I can try to hit and improve stuff. I won't take over the whole conversation though. Like I want to hear, obviously Esteban, you were there. If you have anything to throw in for it,
Well,
I'm happy to hear.
before we like get into specifics, why don't you like so everybody listening kind of has an overview of what we're talking about? Like, why don't you just give us a little bit of the basics of like how many people
Sure.
were there? How
So,
did you divide
so
everything up? How many games did you do? Like to stay by day? Just give us a little overview so that we can kind
sure.
of have some context.
So it was the Las Vegas Open for the Horus Heresy narrative event. So we pride ourselves with being a narrative event every year. And so this year we had 75 to 85 we had 85 tickets sold. 75 players showed up because we always just kind of have a general 10% attrition with I mean, John was going to come, but then the LA fires were going on. And I was looking at it, Wednesday morning, I was like still trying to figure out, are the fires going to get close enough to me that I need to make new plans? So that kind of stuff just happens naturally. So we had 75 people that actually showed up and signed in. And from there, it was an event spread over Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Friday and Saturday, they had 2 games each, so 4 missions in total. And then Sunday was a big apocalypse battle, comprising multiple sets of tables that people could kind of divvy themselves up at will. I want to give a huge shout out to Frontline Gaming. One thing that I really hammered home with them this year was that I really needed them to bring a ton of terrain. And so I showed up and they were like, all right, here are all your boxes. And then also over there in this corner were like, 18 or 20 more boxes of old terrain that they were like they were basically like cannibalize all of that and use whatever you want. So my assistant TO, Brewer, and I, along with some others, had just a really great night Thursday night getting there and setting up as far as just trying to theme all the boards to try to hit, certain aesthetics that we were trying to go for. There were terrain types that I wrote up for LVO this year. So it was the idea that, depending on what board you were on, you had certain specific rules that were playing into your game. Randy, did I answer all of your questions? I'm trying to make sure that I have everything. I think
How
the
many
big other
points?
things.
How many points did you
Yeah.
do for the games?
So it was 3K for the main event. As far as three of our missions were 3K, and then one mission was 2K, just basically dropping 1,000 points out of their initial army. So the mission 1 and mission 2 on Friday were. And I wrote all of these missions by myself, or not by myself, but like I tried to come up with new missions for them so that it wasn't just like go play the rulebook missions or Beta Garmin. And so with that, every person also got a unique specific model per faction when they signed up. So they basically, if you were a loyalist, you got what I called a unifier tech priest. These guys were supposed to be the mechanicum that were actually not really as dedicated to Mars, but more to the Emperor's kind of thinking of trying to build the Imperial Webway. And at this point in the heresy, the Webway is basically collapsed, leading to Terra, and obviously it's sealed by the Golden Throne. So these unifiers, I said, were like being sent out to help try to mitigate a Hellforge that they were fighting over this year. This year's LVO was taking place on the Forge World Gamblian. In the Vegasian system is where we've been fighting over the past few years. So while the loyalists had the unifier tech priest, the traitors had the dark mechanicum adept, which was this kind of very creepy looking model that was able to. It had you rolled a d6 with it every turn, and it would give bonuses based on what you rolled. Kind of that idea of chaos being both a giver and a taker in some instances. I think they were really interesting models. My data that I have behind it, most people really enjoyed it, from what I can tell. The one thing that was like really was that I tried to emphasize with them was I gave them both line. Whatever unit they joined, they gave line to them. And I've heard from other LBOs that one thing that really needed to be emphasized with the idea of objective gameplay, because like when you show up and it's like Blood Feud, yeah, if you don't make it an objective based game, it's just going to devolve into you killing your opponent, which is a fun mission once or twice. But then if it's the entire weekend, you're like, all right, well, really, what's next though? So I printed out 200 consoles to activate to act as objectives. So everyone got 2 objective consoles from me, and then 1 unique unit depending on what allegiance they had. So everyone had, in theory, 2 players playing, 4 objectives were between the 2 of them, so they could kind of spread them out over the mission and stuff like that. And then on day 2, mission 3 was the 2K game, which was supposed to be a little bit more dynamic and just quick, because the mission 4 I wrote to be a doubles game with the option of that. So like you were not required to play doubles, but it was an encouraged aspect, because I don't know, sometimes with the mega battles, they kind of get out of hand really quickly. And I thought this was a cool instance where in mega battles, most of the time, if you bring a tactical marine squad, it's not going to do anything. But in this instance, it was an objective-based mission of 6,000 points for 6,000 points. And all of a sudden your tactical marines mean a lot more holding these objectives for you. There was this really great rule I found in Beta Garmin called Legacies of the Great Crusade, or Memories of the Great Crusade, sorry. And it was a 1 turn only, any unit that has line gains +1 feel no pain. Inexorable. So I rewrote that where basically any unit that has line has it for the entire game. So it was the idea that all of a sudden your line units became so survivable and tried to have these huge slogging matches of just trying to wear down your opponent. And then the final battle on Sunday was just the mega battle where it's no hold bars, bring as many points as you can bring, and we try to match people up as appropriately as possible. The one of the big things that we saw this year, we had I think it was 4 Warlord Titans. We had 1 War Master Titan, not a Warbringer, War Master, the big one from the Adeptus Titanicus. So somebody had printed this. It was very cool to see. I tried to make the board as like kind of dynamic as possible. I will say the best feedback I've gotten so far, the most consistent feedback that most people really agreed on, was that the terrain was really killer this year. And you guys know me, that's kind of what I like in a lot of instances at the moment in my hobby. I really want to try to emphasize that kind of narrative aspect of immersing you in the battle. Yeah, but Esteban, I'd love to hear kind of more of your opinion as well, since like obviously you were there and you can kind of get the player perspective, but we'll kind of jump into more data and stuff like and recap from there.
Yeah, sure. Gosh, where do I start? I guess the first thing to start of is when it comes to like running the Horus Heresy, and the whole rule book and campaign books. I mean, we have a basic framework for missions, right? So these missions can become repetitive. They're not exactly very dynamic for the rule book. I mean, Goonhammer made a pretty decent packet, but I don't think anyone regularly plays the Goonhammer packet anymore. Everyone wants to play, whatever it is they're playing. So I think that's one of the hardest things to do, which is I think you nailed, Reed. You created a really good packet that balanced not just a mix of familiar stuff that everyone knew, but also of new things that would make it interesting. So I think that's probably where you did the best, I think, this weekend, which is in that mission packet, because again, it was fairly easy to read. There wasn't any issue with like understanding something, and it was familiar enough that once you read it once, for the most part, you understood what you were doing.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Esteban. That's high praise.
No, yeah. I guess the next part was terrain. Yeah, no, the terrain was cool, especially with the addition of the terrain that you brought and I brought and some other people brought, I believe. Shout out to the Gamers Haven crew, by the way. Josh really pulled up, brought I think maybe 3 tables worth of terrain. There we go.
Mm-hmm. I mean, like Esteban, you brought 1 or 2. You brought 2 tables worth of terrain as well. I packed my car to the gills, like just with anything that I could think of to add.
Yes,
I think that's what we all brought together. Was the California crowd really came together with this idea that if we can bring terrain, it will make people's event way better.
Yes, and I think that's probably what really, I think, had a positive impact, since I know I was able to salvage my 1 Mechanicum table into about 3 or 4 components, so we can make a really decent Mechanicum setup for 3 boards. And then I also brought my bridge, which everyone, I think, really liked at PSO, and I hope they enjoyed it this year at LVO. I know it was really cinematic for the mega battle on Sunday. But I think your wall was probably the star of the show, honestly, because seeing that wall out there across all the boards really makes it feel like we're actually fighting in a siege warfare event. When you see the walls, you see the gatehouse, you see everything kind of interconnected, it really gives a more thematic sense, and that's really something hard to capture. and the giant plasma gun,
the huge gun that was defending the wall, and once again, we'll get into it, but it ended up shooting. We had a Zone Mortalis board acting as the ship in orbit during our game, and this thing was shooting at them and causing all hell for them as well. So, thank you, Esteban. I really appreciate that, because it's like, I think terrain is really what kind of immerses us and like lets us be in the moment.
Yeah, and that is the hardest part for running any kind of narrative event, is how do you tie your players to your event, and how do you bring everything together? And terrain is the part where I think is most difficult, because it's hard to actually build a cohesive set of terrain. And again, shout out, as you said earlier, to the FLG team. They really pulled out and gave us a lot of stuff. We were able to kind of have our pick of what was left over that they weren't using for the event, which, as much as I hate 40K, because 40K has shifted to their standardized format of terrain over the last couple of years and editions, it actually has really helped us as far as getting terrain from FLG, because now a lot of their terrain is kind of being used just for narrative, which means we've got a bigger selection than I think LVO for 30K has had in previous years, honestly, which is great for us.
Yeah, I mean that was like, I mean I've only been to LVO once, but the year I went, the big problem was there not being enough terrain. And just in the heresy in general, I think one of the things we've learned over the edition is that more terrain is better. The more line of sight blocking you have, the more dynamic the games become. It makes it easier to have varied lists as opposed to everyone just thinking they have to bring as much shooting as possible and just wipe off your opponent in the first turn.
I know we had a lot of tables with a lot of terrain, but we also had a few more scarcer tables. I think those are mostly the wasteland/badland terrains that Reed set up, and those, even though they weren't as thick on terrain, thematically it made sense. And fighting those battles felt like I was fighting on a wasteland where it was a bit more open. Yes, there was some good line of sight blocking, but it did feel more open. And it's like, okay, this is where bad things happen in the wasteland.
Right. So we basically had a couple of irradiated wastelands that Esteban was mentioning, and so like I worked really hard this year on trying to get wrecked vehicles and dead titans to kind of help populate those boards to kind of give that idea that reactors are leaking and that this place has just gone to hell since so much weaponry has been unleashed upon it. It was really cool seeing people utilize that. I made like 50 or 60 smoke plumes like out of little battlefield markers, and next year I have material to make probably 100 more. So I'm just going to keep doing that over the years, and like hopefully that'll just help continue to expand. And that'll it's such an easy thing that like during mission 4 I was just going around and trying to put that on more of the terrain boards just to try to get that idea that we've gone through a process of fighting over the last few days. It's getting kind of smokier and harder to see, and more fires are breaking out throughout the city. Esteban, I mean, like you can talk more about like your games or anything, or I can hop into kind of more details on
Yeah, sure.
on kind of my takeaways.
So I guess I'll start off by a disclaimer. I had a really great year as far as winning. I somehow lucked out on a lot of my missions, honestly, as far as roles and getting opponents that my list happened to be well suited to. I actually kind of feel bad against one opponent because he got a really bad roll in reserves, and I'll cover that right now. But overall, I think the mission, I had a really great time because of the mission setups and the terrain setups. And then let's talk about the first day. How about that? Yeah. So day one was just getting everyone together. I know Reed, you had a bit of trouble trying to get everyone grouped up. It's kind of hard to wrangle 30K players. We're like cats. We're all doing our own little thing, and we don't particularly care until someone yells at us, right?
Right. And I will say this, like I find myself like I can project, I can be a loud person. And it kind of shocked me when everyone was like, "Yeah, Reed, we can't hear you." So next year I'll get a megaphone. I really will. Like it's just come down to that. I think just being in a noisy hall is just what it ends up being. But it did make it a little bit harder to communicate with everyone. And I thought that wouldn't be one of my problems. So
it's the hidden issue of addressing 80 people.
Sure, absolutely. It's like, and some people are like, try to listen up, and I get it, but you're talking about day one, Esteban. Day one was by far and away the most divisive day, I would say.
Yeah, agreed. You want me to continue on that, or do you want to speak up on that?
If you don't mind, I'll take a roll at it first. So
go for it.
Just to kind of give you guys an idea right now, I'm fairly happy with how everything really rolled out at the end of the day. Mission 1 I called Into the Breach. It was this idea that the loyalists have landed and they're trying to just gain ground while the traders are trying to hold as long as possible. Mission 1 we had 15 trader wins, 14 loyalist wins, and 5 draws. Really consistent data, I would say, as far as the win to loss ratio. And that was kind of how I experienced the rest of the weekend. So not to kind of give too many numbers for you guys really quick. Mission 2 was 17 trader wins, 17 loyalist wins, 2 draws. Mission 3 was 14 trader wins, 15 loyalist wins, 4 draws. Mission 4 was a doubles game. So it was, literally half the amount of games. So it was 7 trader wins, 10 loyalist wins, and 1 draw. And so like when you look at that data kind of over a long, one game, it can be an outlier, but over enough of them, then you're like, okay, no side is really skewing to win too much in this instance. So is that, it's then trying to figure out how much balance really needs to be applied to this right now. So that is the hell that I'm in at the moment, where it's like, everyone has an opinion on why they lost and how I need to nerf things. But, at the end of the day, it's trying to figure out what really needs to happen now.
How do you think
But mission, sorry.
I saw in your Facebook post before the weekend started, you were talking about trying to break everybody into 4 different groups based on not necessarily their skill level, but if they were just interested in a more fluffy game versus whether they were more interested in a game that was like a little bit more, intense. How do you feel like that landed up breaking down?
Well, I will say my feedback that from the player survey that I've gotten, and I haven't gotten everyone to reply on that yet, but everyone kind of agrees that group idea is a good idea. It was nearly impossible to implement, though. And so I am racking my brain on how to improve it for next year. But what it came down to was, guys, that I made the math choice of, all right, I plan for 100 players. In theory, 50 players are loyalists, 50 players are traitors. And then I said I had 4 distinct terrain types, with the idea that no person should have to play on that terrain more than once. So 4 missions, 4 types of terrain. So I was like, all right, 4 groups are what needs to happen right here. Well, the first thing that we did when we got there was that we didn't have an even amount of terrain types. We had more irradiated wastelands and civic / fortress boards than we did of spaceport and mechanic and factory boards. That was just an issue of not having enough terrain, enough mats that kind of fit the aesthetic for those. So we kind of had to not compromise on it, but we just made that decision of saying, we can make these look really good. Let's not try to, fit a square peg in a round hole. So with that in mind, we came into it with this idea that the groups are going to be lopsided in some ways. Like some groups, some groups might have to be larger rather than or people would break up and have to do other things. So the first round, I broke everyone up into these groups. But then the second round, I had people that came up and said, hey, this is my buddy. I want to play against him. And he's in group 3 and I'm in group 1. And I'm like, okay, I'm not going to tell you no. And that's what, really, that's what a good EO, I think, does is there to facilitate. I'm there to help you have the best time. I'm not there to exactly make everything balanced or in that way of making sure that everyone is, I guess winning per se. It's everyone's having a good time. So me telling them that they couldn't play together would be kind of ludicrous. A lot of people are LVO veterans. Some people go there for this is my 5th or 6th year going there. So with that in mind, I've met plenty of people that I played against that I'm like, hey, I'd love to get a game with you, and you live across the country, so this is my one time a year to get to try to play you.
Yeah, for sure.
So I can definitely understand where it's coming from, and so my idea was to break everyone up into 4 groups. Group 1 would be basically players that we have the whole demographic of players at LVO, where there's some that say they only get to play 2 games a year, or some people who are very, very new to Heresy. So I have the intention of putting them in group 1 so that they could all kind of learn together and play. Group 2 was kind of in the same boat, but maybe a little bit stronger players and just kind of in understanding the skills of the game, but still narratively based. And then obviously 3 was kind of that, but a little bit more competitive and tuned. And then 4 was the idea, because we have it every year. There's just no way around it, is that some people bring harder lists than others. And that's always been kind of the idea with LVO, is that we're a narrative base, but we have had a power creep in a way. And figuring out how to address that is something that I am thinking about right now. But the truth of it is that, and this is once again, some of my findings is that I don't want to police people. I want people to bring what they want. It just comes down to people being good opponents and fun people, and realizing, hey, I'm bringing kind of a mean list. Maybe if I tune it down, then me and my opponent will have a better game. So I think it kind of comes down to more self-regulation than really me getting in there and trying to tell people what they can and can't bring.
And did you feel like the breakdown? Did you feel like the breakdown was pretty even? Was there a good spread of group 1, 2, 3, and 4, or was like people leaning towards more 4? What was the breakdown?
Fairly. I mean, most people would say they'd probably fall in group 2 or 3, and that's what I kind of expected with that kind of mentality of like, most people kind of don't skew towards extremes in a lot of ways. So saying that you're in 4 is kind of like, you know, there's some people in the, I'd probably be a little guilty of it myself. I'm very much a narrative player. So if somebody said I'm a competitive 30K player, I'd be like, okay, but why? Um, but no, once again, no shade thrown at anyone, but it's just not how I play it. So group 4 though was that idea of I've come with kind of a meaner, harder list, and I didn't even pitch it that way. I looked at everyone and I said, if you are known for winning in your group, not not that you are a competitive player, if you are just known for winning, you should probably be in group 4. And just in that there are some people who don't self-identify as harder game players, but that they just consistently win because they have well-tuned armies. There's a I think a bracket for them in that way. But I will say by the time of game 2 and 3 and 4, the group system just had to be abandoned in a lot of ways. And it's just from the practicality of we didn't have even tables for group 1. All right, you played on table type 3, go to table type 4, and just like that ease of being able to move people from one to another had become unrealistic. And also, we had players that showed up for game 1 that didn't show up for game 2. We had people that showed up on day 2 for game 3 and 4 and weren't there, the first day. So it's like there's just this kind of constant door rotation of groups changing, players changing. So the idea of me trying to regulate that by myself just didn't seem like the right solution. So it kind of became more of a free for all. Not my favorite way to do it, but some of my other findings in this is like, and once again, I'm looking at a lot of data right now because I want feedback. So if you were at LVO and watching this, please fill out the survey because I really want to hear how it can improve. And one thing I have heard from people is like the idea of looking at lists beforehand. And I will say I'm a little opposed to it at the moment because, as I mentioned before, I shouldn't have to police people, and it really just comes down to being good sportsmen and having a good time, and that realizing heresy isn't about winning in that way.
Yeah.
Like
I
I
mean, I
said,
would
guys, I don't
say
want to take over.
to that, the one thing that I've noticed is that different communities have different levels of play. So what might be fluffy to one community to another community is like a lot tougher to play against.
Sure.
So like I've noticed that like and like when you're going to an event that's this big with people from all over the world coming,
Mm-hmm.
you're gonna have people who just like they come from a much more aggressive style of play than maybe someone around here. And I don't think that's
Right.
necessarily because I think the idea, at least from my perspective, if you're looking at people's lists, wouldn't be to say to someone, hey, tone down your list. It would be to say, like, okay, this guy's got a tough list. Let's pair him with someone else who has a tough list. You know?
Mm-hmm.
Um,
And I hear you on that, but like I will say, like I am no expert on being able to look at a list and be able to be like, okay, he's taking too many, like let's think of a Raven Guard player. He's taking 5 too many Dark Furies for me to think that he belongs in group 3, so I'm going to put him in group 4. People are going to have opinions on that. It's all very subjective.
if
It
they're
comes
running
down to
10
just the idea.
deliverers in a Ravensguard list, that's a tough list. That's
Sure, and
my
I,
I
and I,
perspective.
think
I get
I
that.
think it's the nature of like a narrative event, and comparing it to like a competitive event, like the Legion event Beto was in, or the 40K Grand Tournament or whatever. Like when you go to those events, people are gonna bring their hardest stuff, and if you don't bring your hardest stuff, well, hey man, the expectation is like I'm sure Beto when you played at the LVOIS, no one was like, oh, I didn't bring a good list. That's I didn't expect the a non this to be a competitive event kind of thing. Um, but for narrative, right? Like to echo Randy, like one person's narrative could be, even the flip side, like maybe their narrative is they take like 50 breachers and I don't
Mm-hmm.
know, like 3 basilisks, right? Which maybe that's their meta, and you go to an event with a balanced list and they get smashed, right? So it's hard to kind of,
Sure,
yeah, like I don't
and
know.
and there's
I think it's the trickiness of it.
not only that, but like even somebody taking a very thematic and
Mhm.
well reasoned narrative list. Like so, I one guy I really got to know as well. His name was Ryan. He ran this a really amazing Dark Mechanicum army, and it had like I'm sure if he's watching, he'll comment in the thread in the comments on the show. But like I think he had like 5 or 6 defilers, like to the new Dark Mech Martian Civil War unit that is a 40K model that has now been brought into 30K, and from what I understand, is really good and just in that way of like very thematic, and especially for our narrative of being on the Hell Forge. And so like I would never go over there and be like, hey, I hear these are really good, and you brought a lot of them. That might be a problem. I was like, hey man, this is awesome that you brought these. And once again, not calling him at it in any particular way. I think his list is it was really cool seeing. But that was one of the ones I was over there and thinking like, potentially this is maybe a little bit tougher of a list. Maybe this person does belong in a harder bracket. And not to say that he was the only one. I saw plenty of lists where I was like, okay, yeah, that's maybe a little spicier than you need to be. But I think there's a fine balance of people wanting to bring what they want, and I think the idea of try to really police and tell people how to balance themselves is a hard thing.
Yeah.
One thing I have realized though, and this is something I wanted to announce here and talk about because this is going to be how I pitch the event going forward. I think people should realize that LVO is it's not a competitive event. It's not meant to be balanced. We come there like I think in the years that I've gone to LVO and really enjoyed it, it has been when Alex Arthur has written really dynamic custom rules that go for each mission. And so what I'm going to start pitching this as is a narrative event, and think of it more like Apex missions from the campaign books,
Oh yeah.
where they're not like, and I was just rereading the Apex missions today, getting ready for this, because in that book, GW even says these are not meant to be balanced. People can come to LVO and play Age of Darkness, 1 through 6 mission rules, or the Siege of Cathonia or Beta Garmin kind of more competitive style missions. Like, I don't care. I'm there to facilitate you being there and having a good time. If somebody reads the rules for a mission and it's like, hey, this is going to be a stomp for you playing my army in this kind of mission, play a different mission then. I don't care. It really just boils down to people having a good time, and at the end of the day, some of these missions are imbalanced, and it's just because I'm not a professional rules writer, and there's just no way that I can perfectly nail it. And like some of you guys have gotten to play some of my missions as we were beta testing for LVO, and so the particularly mission 2, the shield generator mission, went through a ton of iterations as far as like how I've tried to maximize it. And so here's the really interesting part though. It's like in all of my missions, I will at least have one person saying didn't enjoy it. And then, for every person that didn't enjoy it and said it, I might have 1 or 2 that said they loved it. So it then becomes that hard point of like how much change really needs to happen. One person in their feedback said, so the shield generator was putting off a wave aura that made it harder to charge. It had a -4 to charging it for the loyalists to get there and try to blow up the shield generator. Somebody put in their comments that 3 out of their like 4 contemptor dreadnoughts weren't able to failed their charge over multiple turns, and that were like 5-inch charges. So it's this idea that for some people, the luck of the dice definitely affects it. And then other people, somebody will say it was skewing towards the defender. Others will say it was way too easy for the attacker. So it's really dependent on which game it was.
But it's also human nature. You have 80 plus people with anything. Some people are going to love something. Some people are going to hate it. I don't think you're ever going to please everybody.
Yeah.
Right.
Nope.
To your point, Nate, that like, yeah, I like that you mentioned like it's a narrative event, because yeah, at the end of the day, right, if you lose all 5 games of narrative event, like it shouldn't matter. It's a narrative event, if you lost all 5 games because the missions were unbalanced, it's a narrative event. Like technically, on the logical conclusion is who cares? The point is you play narrative, cool missions with a narrative tying them together with some cool rules. Like like your win-loss ratio, like the moment you talk about that, like, oh, it wasn't fun because the game wasn't fair. Like, well, that's technically a competitive mindset
Mhm.
because the winning is what matters. You know,
Mhm.
that's what I'm thinking. At least that's when I'm thinking about like a narrative event versus a competitive
Sure.
event. Like, that's kind of what comes to mind.
And
If I
that's
can
why
offer
when we
like
look
a
at the
counterpoint,
metadata, oh,
Mhm.
like
sorry,
as a
go ahead,
as a
Randy.
counterpoint to that, like yes, there's a competitive mindset, but I want to win my games when I play. Like for me, that's part of the fun is trying to like outfox my opponent. And but like I'm
Sure,
not
but
gonna
Randy, I
like
think with that, like, there's a difference between wanting to win
yeah.
and having a good game. Like, even a good game can be a draw or a loss.
Absolutely.
Like, kind of like what John was saying.
Yeah.
It's like if it's close and it's dynamic in that way that you are engaged and not like raffle stomped. Now, some people got stomped in some of these missions, which is the part where I feel bad because I don't because these people felt bad and they came over and hey, I just lost turn one. What gives? And I'm like, well, how much were you playing the mission? And it might sound like some people were trying and some people weren't, and some people had infiltrating armies that started on objectives and stuff like that. So it's like trying to figure out, okay, well, I didn't plan for all these infiltrators in some ways, and how to mitigate that for next year.
Yeah. I mean that's one of the things we were talking about when we were playtesting. It's like it's really hard when you're trying to make unique custom missions, which like it's almost weird to say because 90% of armies are Space Marines, but at the same time, like there's certain legions, like there's certain play styles that do really well against certain missions against others. Like fast
Mm-hmm.
armies or infiltrating armies or deep strike armies have really big advantages in certain types of games. And like that's one of those things where like that's the struggle with a narrative event. Like if you're trying to do something unique, something where like it feels a little bit different, you're you're inherently giving an edge to a certain type of army um by doing that. And so
And
that's the trick to figure out. Um
and another thing I'm really trying to work on figuring out as well is like, how complex is too complex? Because so some people said that they just forgot the terrain rules, overall. Fine, that's okay. Um, I took the Irradiated Wasteland. I directly almost took that rule from book 4, Conquest of Heresy 1.0, because it has terrain rules in that as a suggestion. And I think it's a really great and thematic one. It's the idea that basically, every unit that doesn't have an invulnerable save or like isn't heavy. So like models that you would think that don't have, you know, advanced respirator systems, were having to take toughness tests, and if they failed it, they took wounds. People were saying that was too complex. And so I get that. And it might just be the amount of units that were not affected by it, which were like heavy, armiger, dreadnought, autonoma, and anything with an invulnerable save, which doesn't sound like a lot to me, but but for some people who are maybe newer to that rule, it might be too much to kind of remember, you know, turn to turn. So it is this fine balance of trying to figure out, not to be too vanilla, but also not to have every topping in the world.
I mean that's one of the things that I've discovered is I feel like whenever there's a game that has special rules that aren't directly related to scoring in the mission, more often than not, you use them in turn one and you don't use them for the rest of the game. And it could be because they're too complex, or you literally just don't even think about it. You forget about it because you're too into what's happening on the board, which is,
Well,
I
I
mean,
will
I'm
try
just thinking
next year to
like,
get the. Sorry, John. Go ahead.
sorry, not this conversation is just makes me just because I'm brainstorming like, how would you have a really good narrative event and everything like the solutions I'm thinking of is like you're just driving it to a competitive event. Like balance missions is more competitive, you know. Limiting army lists that are too skewy and are, easy to win with, that just makes it more competitive.
Mhm.
I don't know. It's tough, right? Because like a narrative event leads to all these opinions about what a narrative event should be, as the feedback you're getting, suggests, rules are too complex, rules are too simple, missions are too flavorful, missions are not flavorful enough, armies are too unbalanced, like people are skewing too much. It's like I'm just thinking like if you go to the Legion event or the 40K event, if you have a complaint, well, sorry, dude, skill issue. You didn't,
Yeah,
um, which that's not what we're trying to do, right? But that's just the challenge of a narrative event is I mean, I assuming you implement all these cool ideas, people will still think it's not narrative enough.
Yeah,
I
or
think,
not,
you know,
or not balanced enough to be,
yeah,
that anyone can just show up and play. And like that's why I think next year I'm definitely going to hammer home this idea that we are not a balanced mission
yeah,
set in that way. I'm trying to come up with stuff that is unique and bespoke for everyone so that you can come and have these, interesting times.
No, yeah, yeah.
Games that you can't get anywhere else, basically,
Yeah.
with terrain and cool people. So I like I said, it's been really interesting kind of reading people's opinions and what's going on with what they thought. And like I said, for every person that might not have liked one mission, I'll find one or two other people that did really like it. And some said that they were going to take it home and put it as part of the mission packet that they always run now. Like they're going to play it at home. So I'm like, I think that's good data. Is that like some people really liked it. I will say as well, out of my data, I can kind of report to everyone. Most people still seem in favor of the SN community rules. Out of my responses right now, I have 80 to 20% saying that they like that.
So you instituted
Um,
that for LVO, this and
mhm. Well, so a few of them. I used three of them. It was the Artificer Armor one. It was the Wound Spillover in Close Combat for challenges. Yeah,
okay, like
and then the Deep Strike one where you can't conga line. You have to do the 1.0 where everyone kind of has to go in a concentric ring, so they're all in one place. Which I think is a more helpful, way to play that than all of a sudden you're like, wait, where did this line of men come out of
yeah,
when they deep strike? So
yeah. I mean, as a, I know I didn't get to unfortunately hang out and go to LV, go to the Heresy event this year because I was playing in the Legion competitive event, and as someone who was playing in a fully regulated, everyone's list is looked over, everything is to the T. The big thing I missed about Heresy was that, yeah, it's not. There was something nice about like, oh, I just rolled up and this is like a random surprise, and all these lists are like catered to like what you like in your local meta and what you like to play versus like what I think is the absolute best top thing. So in the sense of like, it felt like every game I played, I knew the opponent's list already. Whereas like when I played in Heresy events, it was so nice to like the surprise of like, yeah, I don't. There's so many different little variations of how you can make your army, and like I really don't think people go into the Heresy event as much as they are like, some people are like, oh, I want to play a little bit more competitively. I don't think people go in fully thinking like, I want to play the most insane competitive game. I think they still want to play like, cool, my Iron Hands have I don't know, it has a Kratos or something that I think is like maybe a little less crazy, but they like still want to play with their like cool models versus
mm-hmm.
like going fully in. As soon as you make things so fair, like John was saying, you lose a lot of like the love of it. And I think that people who have the complaints of the rules being balanced, well, we don't play Heresy for full balance, because if we did, then it would be the worst game, the worst balanced game of all time. Like it would be.
We'd
So
just be the 40K crowd, which like,
exactly. So it's like we're
so
not
my
going 40K. We're going
I'm
for.
going to give you guys a prime example of people kind of giving their opinion. Was like so we over LVO we've had rules that have trickled down from 1.0 that have kind of controlled our LVO meta. One thing I removed this year was that you could take a Warhound Titan in your 3,000 point list, and people didn't go ballistic exactly. It's not the correct term, but it was divisive again in our Facebook community as far as like people saying this is going to break the game. If we see one Warhound this year, we're going to see 12 next year, and all this stuff. And like, I was like, guys, I think you're overestimating how much a 10-man las cannon team is going to
yeah, I
damage.
was reading those comments
Like,
and I was like, have these people never played against a Warhound before? It's not that hard to take down.
Yeah.
and
Like,
it's like it's just this mentality of 1.0 where people think of it as more scary than it is, when like there are far scarier aspects in this game at the moment. So like me removing that was in the idea that, yeah, you're a Marine running around through a city, and then all of a sudden a Warhound Titan comes around the corner, and you have to deal with that. It's a cool mission, like that you might not get to run at your local game store. So like, why not increase that narrative aspect and like allow it?
Yeah, I'd rather fight a Warhound than a 10-man suzerain squad.
Yeah.
No, I actually I support you. I think that just doubling down like, yo, this is narrative. Like you want to balance the game? Too bad. This is not, um random terrain effects going on. Yep, this is heresy. You're playing a Warhound. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Tell them that story. You're in Calth, and then there's a traitor or loyalist Warhound, and you're like a little word bear. It's like, oh shit, what do I do?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Pray to
Now,
the
I can
dark gods.
understand a Reaver being too much, and obviously a Warlord almost needs another Warlord to take it out. So, like, I can
Also,
understand
the game
those.
already has those point restrictions. That's the whole point of the 20%.
Yes,
You
exactly.
can't even put
So,
those
like,
in the
and
3,000.
I didn't remove that. So, like, at a 3,000 point list, you can take a Warhound Titan. That is the only Titan that can fit in that restriction category. So, like, I didn't think it was the most radical thing. One person brought a Warhound Titan for their 3,000 point game. And I mean, like, if you guys wanted me to, I can go look up all their data. But, like, from what I remember seeing it get blown up a fair amount of times.
Yeah. Yeah, and also like that whole idea of being like this fear mongering, like, well, if it's one Warhound now, it's going to be 5 next year. I'm like, awesome. Someone showed up with 5 Warhound Titans. How cool! Like, what do you mean? We,
Like,
Oh
I'm
man,
about
some
making the tables
plastic
look
with
cooler.
shock pulse.
yeah, I'm
I
like,
think
so exciting that a guy owns 5 Warhound Titans and then brought them to the game. Like, wow, incredible! Like that shouldn't be something to be scoffed at. That should be something like the fact that you spent that much money, you painted all those up, and then you're here at this event. Like, awesome! That's crazy. Of course, you should play that. You know?
So I think you guys know this from me, but like, so when I took over with LVO, like I kind of pitched the idea of like people shouldn't have to just bring one 3,000 point list. I don't care what people run mission to mission. Like if you wanted to play your tank company mission one and then mission two, you're like, all right, now it's time for my recon company or whatever. Like people should be allowed to switch up for a narrative event. So I will say like the community being hesitant on accepting this idea that the imbalance is just part of it. And like I'm trying to stop feel bad moments. Like that is what I'm trying to work on. But
How
this
do they fix
idea
that in
that
wargaming, honestly? Like that's gonna
what's
happen.
up?
I don't think
Yeah.
you can fix that in wargaming. Like that's gonna happen. Um,
And that's why it
Even
just
in a
comes down to
perfect
better
system.
like having better opponents. Like it's
Yeah,
just being good people that
yeah.
are enjoyable to play with. So like I have heard that, and John, sorry, I know you were about to talk about
No, no,
something,
you're
but
good,
like
you're
I
good,
have
yeah.
heard a little too, like I have in some of my feedback, I have heard a little bit that there has been some gaminess as well happening about like people arguing about like a quarter of an inch of somebody being within an objective of like do they hold it or do they not like, and I mean a quarter inch is a quarter inch. I understand that, but like this person was talking about like do we measure from the center of the objective to the outside point of the objective, stuff like that where it's just like dude, are you close? Like yeah, sure, you hold it fine.
That's so funny.
Just
I,
imagine like walking up as a TO, I'm like, yeah, dude, you're cool. Just
Yeah.
walk away.
And to be on it, okay, well, you're on it. There, boom. Next question.
Next question.
Yeah.
right, it was definitely a very big learning experience for me. So I once again I have to say to everyone who came out and played, thank you, and I hope you had a great time. I'm trying to ensure that next year is even bigger and better. But there is this idea right now in me that I'm kind of at this point where I'm like, I don't know how much more I can do to help in some issues. Some people were complaining to me about infiltrate. Infiltrate is the way the rules are written, and I was like going through the Beta Garmin and Siege of Cathonia missions. I know they're the same. Like looking to see are any of these trying to negate infiltrate, and none of them are. And if I start trying to negate infiltrate so much, then it might make Alpha Legion and Raven Guard players unviable.
also if you
So
like that's on their list building. If they're worried about infiltrate, that's what augury scanners are for. Put augury scanners on all your units, and you're creating 18-inch bubbles across your deployment zone where they can't deploy within 18 inches of your battlefield edge.
it
Like,
was the issue was that people were deploying on objectives,
Yeah.
is
Scoring.
what I'm hearing. And so like I'll look into how I can fix that. But I think at the end of the day, that's just kind of part of the game. And then if somebody's infiltrating their army, that means like, well, it should be fairly split up if they're having to control 3 or 4 objectives. Like, then can you not try to go hammer down 2 of them and try to take back those objectives and then try to slug it out for the rest of the game?
You know, I'm sympathetic to people who are like, you know, maybe it's like you played up against a White Scars army on an objective-based game, and you know they're just too fast and they can get on it. You know, I'm sympathetic to like an Alpha Legion player that infiltrates right on top of it. Like, I'm totally sympathetic to the opponent that has to play against that. However, it is a bit of the luck of the draw, and when we play these unbalanced games, it's like, yeah, I could look at it as like I'm screwed from the beginning, or I could look at it as because I'm screwed from the beginning, I'm going to try the craziest tactics in the world to try to claw this back. And like, yeah, that sucks. And you probably won't hit that twice. You know, that you'll get like a bad game like that where it's like the odds are stacked against you. And like, yeah, that's a bummer. It's a narrative event. But the next game probably won't be that way. Or the next game, you'll probably be fine. These skewed matches, they're bummers. And of course, like, I'm sympathetic towards that. But at the same time, like, you can't balance the entire game for every variable. You know, it's not doable.
Yeah.
And even if you got 2 games in a row, it's a narrative event. Like, you know, there's no matchmaking. Like,
and I will say this: in every narrative, there's always got to be a loser as well. And not to say that anyone should go there with that intention, or once again to get a, you know, I don't want anyone to feel bad, as I mentioned. But I will highlight the one thing that I know I can do better next year is just better administration. So I've talked to, you know, what was really amazing was getting to talk to people who like, hey, man, I run this event and here's how I do it. And, you know, we do QR codes on all the tables so everyone can just pick it up and like know what the terrain rules are and what the mission are. And I'm like, okay, that's cool. That's easy stuff for me to do. And then potentially how to populate data with mission forms being turned back in, with reporting for each mission. Like, I think that's just stuff that I'm gonna be working on over the year. Like, that's something I definitely know I'm gonna be doing. And then I'm gonna be writing out. I was planning to do more narrative lore blurbs in between missions, but since people couldn't hear me as well, I got kind of nervous with standing up there and being like, okay, well, you know, how many people are really gonna hear what I have to say? And so next year I'm going to just have those pre-written so that I can kind of post them out and like have people kind of understand them and digest them at the same time to enhance the narrative.
I think the $1 million question is, so you are signed up, you're coming back next year then. You did love it. Yeah.
Me?
Yeah.
I guess. Yeah. No, I mean, like, come on, guys. LVO is probably one of my favorite weekends of the year. Like, I can't kind of overemphasize how, you know, how much it almost dominates my life. I got back home on Monday and I was like, shit, man, my year actually begins now in a way, because it felt like that was kind of my big thing to get through, you know, after the holiday season. But I'm so excited for next year with the trade. So I guess I should talk about this as well. The traders had a decisive win this year at Gamblin. So in the Vegasian system, I did a lot of research in the previous LVO years of what all the other EOs had written, or TOs had written. And so the narrative had been pushing towards Beta Garmin, and I had planned for 2 years at this Forge World. But with the trader decisive holding of that Forge World, I decided I think it's time actually to just push on to Beta Garmin. So I think there are some really cool opportunities with that going forward. I'm getting rid of the special character restriction going forward. So I'm going to put out a list of characters that we know were at Beta Garmin during the heresy of this era, and like people will be able to select those. And in a year or two, we'll play the Titan Death where Jagatai and Sanguinius even show up. And I'm not saying that then they can show up in your 3K list that are there, you know, in every mission, but I'm open to that kind of mentality. Or like somebody says that, well, with the idea that eventually we're going to make it to the Siege of Terra so that people can make really awesome themed lists that are part of the siege. You know, the Dominion Zephon, the Fafnir Ran, the Sigismund, and trying to pick up his seconds is what they were called in the book, where he's just going and wrecking traders. And then, you know, I've heard people who said like, I want to take Abaddon. You know, that's awesome. I want people to be able to take these special characters or create their own with our Chosen of the Primarch, which the Chosen of the Primarch seemed to be a big hit this year as well. But that's a big hit every year at LVO.
Yeah, I always like that rule.
Yeah. What was your like favorite moment of the weekend?
Esteban, you go first,
Oh,
man. I've been talking plenty.
I was gonna say we diverged so far from me talking about my experience. I think my favorite of part of the event was on day two with the doubles event because I actually ended up pairing up with the Space Wolf player who brought that Warhound, and his entire army was designed to deploy from infiltration or from outflank. So he had about 1,000 points out with his Warhound and a couple of units just to kind of be the backline. And I was basically playing 2v1 against a Trader Space Wolf player and an Iron Hands player. And this Iron Hands player was playing strong because he brought 3 Leviathans
Ooh.
or the Rock'em Sock'em.
Yeah.
And I will say, to my credit, that Warhound didn't get blown up because of me. I held that line hard with my Dark Angels. So,
Mhm.
and I know that guy was complaining. He's like, dude, I haven't had this thing last past turn two at all. And I'm like, I got you, fam. I'm gonna keep you alive, and I did. But it was a really fun match. Unfortunately, we did have one oopsie, which we realized later. It was the destroyer rule. I understood it, and he understood it as when it hits, it deals D3 wounds. But we missed the part in the rule section where it happens after saves, so it's supposed to be like brutal, where it does it to individual models. We thought it was every time it does a wound, it deals D3 wounds to whatever it's hitting. So we thought it was to the unit or to the dreadnought, but it's actually after save. So we kind of messed up on that. So I think we kind of accidentally took an unfair advantage there without realizing it. So that's a rules comprehension issue since I've never used Destroyer ever, and I just remembered, wait, Destroyer does something. Double read what it does. It's like, oh, D3 wounds. Okay, D3 wounds, D3 wounds. And we didn't realize that because it came up at some point. We're like, this is feeling a little too strong. What's wrong with this setup? And then we're like looking through the rules at the end of the game. Oh, we misread this. Oops. Which I don't think swinged us too hard in that match, honestly, but because we did win, but it was a 1 point victory win. So I guess it could have gone to them if we had done it correctly in this case. But that was my highlight for the week, which was 2v1ing a Trader Space Wolf players with two 10-man Terminator squads and then 3 Leviathans coming barreling down at me. And I'm like, okay, I got this. I'm gonna hold this
Yeah,
line.
Esteban, you always look like you were having really good matches, so I'm like really happy with that.
Oh yeah, no. I guess again, I had great matches all this weekend just because I felt like I was actually having fun and my opponents were more or less having fun. I think the only match I think that went bad per se would be the very first round, which is with the Into the Breach mission, and that's only because my opponent brought a very reserve heavy list where he had almost 2,000 points of army in reserve, and then failed all of his reserve rules on turn two.
Yeah.
And that's like
Did he master
that's a
signal?
feels bad. He didn't bring us master signals, but
That's
it's
his
just
fault.
but he failed four reserve rolls for four separate units coming in through four separate means. It's like, how do you roll 4 1s?
So I take 85 point master signal. I've witnessed like actually in the past month, speaking of like my experiences, the past month I've witnessed like 3 games where people had like 1,000 to 2,000 points in reserve, no master signal. And of course they got reserve skill. I'm like, come on guys, like 85 points.
Yeah,
85
right.
Well,
points.
like to mitigate that, one of our board types was the spaceport, which gave you a reroll on your reserves and the scatter die when coming in from reserve. So it was like this idea that that doesn't play for every opponent, but if your list happens to benefit from it, good on you, man. Like that means that you were deployed at the right time at the right area for your army.
Exactly. But yeah, but besides that, I would say the next high point would probably be the mega battle. And that's because I kind of got to play kind of group slash team captain because Reed, you announced everyone, hey, this is the mega battle. This is what we're doing. We're gonna put all the Titans and super heavies on this table. But hey, for those of you who don't want to fight on this table where you've got, strength D destroyer weapons on 10-inch blast templates wiping out your entire army in one shot, go find your group and find and play on a table if you don't want to be on this table. And I was like, okay, I didn't bring any Titans. As much as I want to play on that fun table, I also don't want to struggle with watching Titans blast me off the table. And I was just like, hey, anyone who doesn't want to play on Titans, come to me. I'm setting it up. And I was able to really quickly kind of group together. And I think this is something maybe Reed you should think about for next year, and I was thinking about it, is maybe you need to find a way to assign people to be team captains / group captains,
Yes.
people that you can
So
kind of
yes, rely on to help wrangle. And
yeah.
you're absolutely right, Esteban. I don't mean to cut you off on that. That is absolutely something that me and one of my groups of guys that I've been kind of relying on to help me get ready for LVO as far as just reading my rules and making sure that they made sense. We all kind of agreed that that is something that probably will help next year. Is the idea that I can help divest a little bit of the responsibility. It'll just kind of require a little bit more prep ahead of time, which is not a problem. I'm happy to do that. I'm happy to get it done early and well, but it then just comes down to making sure that everyone is on the same page. And then I can just work on, enjoying, making my lore blurbs and doing stuff like that. Because I will say I got to play one game this weekend, which it was a weird experience for me at LVO. Going there and not playing. I had a great time though, just walking around and seeing everyone and getting to talk and check in with people. Are you guys doing okay? Does everyone understand the rules? Are we all having a good time? Stuff like that.
No, I know exactly what you mean, Reed, because our group ran last year early in the year in February. We ran our little brawl through Beta Garmin at Odyssey in Pasadena, which I was running pretty much with our small little group. And even though we only had, I think, 8 people show up, it was still fun to do that administrative role of gathering people up. Now, obviously, nowhere near as complex as wrangling 75 people compared to 8 or 9, but it is enjoyable. There's that enjoyable aspect of being the organizer and getting everyone going. And again, I think it just comes down to and to go back to your idea, I don't think the groups was a bad idea. I mean, I think it's great if you could do that just for the first battle. Like, hey guys, we're doing the first battle. Anyone who's still kind of new to the game or doesn't play very often, needs kind of a refresher, let's get you guys all here for group 1 as your warm-up match. Everyone who's a really hard player who really wants to give themselves a challenge, hey, I want you guys all grouped up for your first match because I want you guys to really enjoy your hard game first thing off. Maybe that's what you need to do for that first day. Like, hey, just round 1 is the warm-up match and separate people just as that initial run through, and then say, okay, everyone mixes in together once you've got your warm-up games in. And again, that's where I think having a group captain would be helpful, where you can be like, hey, John, go run the hardcore team. Hey, Esteban, go run the newbie teams. And then we just spread out. You address the main group, we address the small groups. And that could even apply to the loyalist and traitor factions. You said you wanted to do blurbs, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's the intention, is that we're a narrative event. And I will say, one of the things I feel like I failed with this year, one of the few things that I feel like I actually really failed with, was giving those kind of lore updates. And it was just the truth of it is, getting there, setting up, trying to make sure that everyone is having a good day. At the end of the day, all I wanted to do was go just hang out and decompress. And so I'd wake up early to then do all of my points calculations and stuff like that. And then roll right into the day. So it was just never finding a great time to do lore blurbs and try to get them out at appropriate times. So I think coming in there next year with some options at least written, so that, depending on what happens, I'll have some good at least prepared notes at the very least.
Yeah, and that's where I'm thinking you can assign captains. If you have somebody to be your loyalist captain and somebody to be your traitor captain, they can wrangle up the crowds when you assemble, be like, hey, traitor captain, go read this to your group. Hey, loyalist captain, go read this to your group. And I mean, that's what I did essentially for the mega battle. I gathered everyone up, made sure everyone knew what we were doing, and then said, okay, guys, let me do a quick speech. I think we had maybe 12 people in total just getting hyped up with that. And I think that's what you should try to do, at least just because I like the hype up moment. That's what me is. If there's something I like,
great with that. The administration part is just something that, once again, I'm already starting to reach out and talk to other people about how they run theirs and getting advice just still further about how to use QR codes that transfer data directly to a spreadsheet that automatically populates. It was I just had an issue where some people just filled out the wrong Google sheet for which mission they were reporting for. So it's it's just best laid plans and trying to plan for failure in some way. Yeah. And I will say this as well, reading the rules is always important, fellas. So at the end of the day, I know these packets come out kind of last minute with the idea that so people can't list Taylor. But reading the rules is a big thing, and all the posts that go along with it. So you can kind of be up to date.
Yeah, no, that's definitely a thing. I can tell you the first mission, me and my opponent had to read like 3 times because we read the deployment for attacker and we're like, wait, what? And then he's like, hey, can you read this? I didn't understand it. It's your deployment. Can you read? He looked at it, he's like, hold on, what? And then we both read it together. We're like, oh, that's how it works. It was just, I think, not necessarily that it was written poorly. It was just we read it once, thought we understood it, but then got stuck on something, reread it again, and then,
Mhm.
third time's the charm, right? And it
Sure.
was just understanding that it was separating forces of no more than 1,000, but more than 500 in the defender's forward deployment zone. And then it's like everything else is in the rear deployment zone. And again, that was because he's got almost 2,000 points in reserve. It's like, wait, how does that work with? And
Sure.
we had to double check and calculate points to make sure it was going to work correctly. And again,
That is an
that's
interesting example.
exactly,
Yes.
and that's specifically because he brought such a heavy or reserve list that it's like, oh wait, can I even fill up 500 points? And we had to double check, like, okay, no, I've got like 1,100 points. Cool. That 1,000 points goes in the middle, and I get 1 unit in the defender's line. And that's where it came into like, wait, read. Okay, we understood it. Can we even accomplish this in this case? And I think that was just the one odd situation where it happened.
Sure.
And then honestly, like none of the missions were difficult to understand beyond that first one, just because of the unique situation of the army list. Everything was written well. Like it wasn't difficult to read. Everything was familiar.
Thank
Like,
you. And I had the book right there open with me, like reading their like GW's missions and trying to present the data in the exact same way. Um, and it's just best laid plans. They always kind of go askew. So like mission 4 was basically just a minute. Like that was the one mission that I tried to kind of keep more vanilla because it was the idea that it was two people against two people. So we kind of needed to kind of tune it down to make it easier for them all to understand.
no,
Um,
agreed. And that is
People were
also,
saying though, oh, sorry, one last thing, Esteban. People were saying in some of their comments though is like, needed to write a rule that you can't put your objective right next to your deployment zone. It has to be certain many inches away, so that you can't just be there and be within the 3 inches that would count from the start of the game. And I'm like, okay, I hear you on that. That makes a lot of sense. It's just that's not how Dominion is living in it. I'm happy to update it for next year though.
no, that I think that mission was fine. It's just I think mission 4 has to be a really simple mission because that's day 2 of everyone heavily drinking and gaming. Like I can tell you, missions 1s and 2, I was like 100% all 8 cylinders firing. Mission 3, I was like, okay, I think I've got 6 cylinders firing. Mission 4 was like, okay, half my banks are dead. I don't know what I'm doing. I think I'm just trying to not die here and make sure my friend's warhound doesn't die. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like making sure that it's easy to understand is the important part. And I think that you nailed that, at least as far as mission 4 and 3 goes. Like those ones were clear to me, absolutely. Generator, the power overload was also very clear. Again, just in the mission 1 to the breach, just because of the specific circumstances of my opponent's army list made us have to question, wait, can you even legally deploy based on this? And then trying to figure that out as we were reading it through.
I
Sure.
think what I liked about your mission set, because I had the privilege of getting to read a lot of the missions, is unlike previous years with Heresy, where you were playing this, and like no shade to the previous event organizers for the other LVOs, but it was sometimes difficult to, because you were playing these games where it's like you knew what your mission you were playing and your opponent knew what mission they were playing, but you didn't tell each other. So there was like this surprise element, which is really cool, but also really confusing in a sense of like, wait, am I playing this one or am I playing that one? And then why is there special parameters on this one? And I can't really talk to my opponent about it because there's such the secrecy thing. So what's really cool is that when people were playing similar missions, when there was a group of people playing the same mission, you could very easily go over, like lean over and be like, hey, how do I do this one? Like, and someone will explain it to you right next to you, which I think is nice. All of a sudden, there's not like this, like, I'm in a surprise mission and I can't really talk to my opponent about how exactly this all works.
I think that there's a world in like one of those missions being included in a packet going forward. Like in a future LVO, I'm sure I'm going to do that because I was thinking about instead of doing our mission 3 this year, of doing something like that, of like, hey, you have these 3 options, your opponent has these other 3 options, you guys choose which one you want,
Yeah.
and then play this kind of secretive mission, which would be kind of more of like that Black Ops kind of infiltration, it would be the 2,000 point lower end game and more of elite specialists trying to kill each other.
Yeah.
But yeah, for an entire mission packet, I did agree on that, and so like I wanted to kind of write out very specific rules for these. No confusion, hopefully.
Did you guys notice? I'm curious from an army perspective. Uh, did you notice if there were like particular armies that there were more of? Because I remember when I was at LVO, there were a lot of World Eaters players. Like, did you feel like there were a lot of a certain legion or another? I remember one person was complaining that like you should ban Shattered Legions. Did anyone even bring a Shattered Legions list?
Not
Like,
that I know of. I did not see anyone bring Shattered Legion, and it was like once again a very funny Facebook post of like, "Reader, you banning a Shattered Legion?" And I was like, "No," and then people are like, "Oh my god," like, and then it's like, well, and once again, no one showed up with them. And it's just like kind of that mentality of like, okay, we need to be scared of something that we don't know about.
Yeah.
And like as tough as Shattered Legion is, it's like it really isn't. I don't think as difficult as people are going to make it out. Like once again, I've never played it. It's just this idea of it's just as many Legion rules as like I normally have. I'm going to highlight something huge though. We had 4 Solar Ox players. That would have been unheard of a year ago,
Yeah.
or in
Plastic.
previous years, So thank you, GW, for the plastic. I will say I felt like I saw a lot of mech armies this year. I mean, like I always feel like I see a good amount of mech armies though. No army that I can particularly think of that was like, okay, here's another repeat.
I was gonna say I counted 4 Ox, 2 Militia, and I think 3 Mechanicum, if I got my numbers correctly. Did you get that same number, Reed?
We definitely had more than 4 Mechanicum, or
Okay.
3 or 4 Mechanicum. I will say as well, one of the exciting things was when we kind of started off on day 1, I kind of said like, all right, who is at their first LVO? We had some hands raised, and then how many of you is this your first Heresy event? At LVO, and we had about a dozen people raise their hands. So like, I always love that idea that we're getting more new players because there's a lot of us that come year to year, and then I hope that people can kind of see how amazing this can be.
did you guys get a lot of people walking by and be like, "Oh, what is this? Oh, this is Heresy. Oh, I want to play."
You know what? Okay, so here is maybe one of my few gripes with the event in general, and like I'm going to talk to Frontline Gaming about this. Frontline Gaming, if you're watching, please do like and subscribe. Comment and do all the algorithm stuff that all the YouTuber people say. But we were in the very back of the back hall. Like, so normally we're in kind of the front of the back hall most years. They put us in the very back this time, which was, I don't like walking as far, and I had a lot of stuff to bring in. So like that was not as convenient for my life. But it was fine. And like, but what was amazing though was on Sunday, we made some spectacular boards, I think, with like, once again, everyone brought out their creme de la creme. We had 4 Warlord Titans. We had probably at least a dozen Titans to play. And, I think very immaculate boards with all the terrain that everyone provided. And people I saw come by, and I think I saw at least 7 or 8 people that came by, and their jaw literally dropped. And that's a really cool moment to see people who are like, oh my God, like, what is this? How can I join this? I think that's where Heresy really stands out, is this idea of spectacle.
Especially when the Titans come out to play. I mean, there's just nothing that matches that. Just the scale of it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. It's really nice to feel as like an adult and still get excited for seeing like a Titan like I did like when I was a kid. And I think nothing brings that out quite like a mega battle.
Yeah. And so with the narrative moving towards Beta Garmin, I'm trying to include the Legion and Zone Mortalis groups more. It was looking for a long time, like Legion Imperialis wasn't going to be there. They didn't end up having space for Zone Mortalis for this year as well. So I'm really going to be pushing Frontline Gaming to give us enough space for all, so that we can include them in our narrative and stuff like that, and just like have that diversity of options for play. But then over the next year or so, I think we're going to end up, getting into the beta Garmin with the Titan Death and having more mega battles with tons of Titans. It's going to be exciting.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Do you guys have any more last comments on the event?
Nope. Thank you for
Uh,
everything. I can't wait for next year.
yeah, I think it was a great event. Reed, get that megaphone ASAP.
Yeah, dude. Once again, I think I'm pretty loud.
Uh,
Like, I think I can do it fairly, better than most people,
oh
but
no, no, no,
somehow
no!
that room drowned me out.
It is purely because you're in a room with like 1,000 other nerds talking and screaming. Like there's no
Yep.
way anybody short of like the loudest tall person could possibly be heard over that noise. Like I think I was maybe 5 feet away from you, and there were times where you spoke something, and I was like, "Huh?" And I was like 5, 10 feet away from you, just because of how loud that room is. Like it's definitely not you. It's the fact that you've got 1,000 players probably in a single room, all talking, and that sound just carries. It carries across that
I feel
entire
you.
room because we had Kill Team south of us, we had Warhammer Fantasy Narrative north of us, and then we had Age of Sigmar in front of us. So we had 3, 4 other. Oh, and we also had Star Wars, I think, Shatterpoint next to them too. So we had 4 completely different game systems with their own narrative events. People all trying to talk at the same time. It's like, of course, we're surrounded by other groups. There's no way we're going to be able to hear everyone crystal clear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, what I'm gonna do next year is I'll just make a really intricate cosplay costume with like little vox horns that come above me so that I can, speak into a speaker and have everything come out and everyone hear me, and it'll be
Okay,
all
if you actually do
immersive.
that, I will make you a banner, and it will say Terra Invictus on it. I will make you wave that thing all weekend long.
Why can't you just make that for me now? I do that all the time.
Because I have to actually go buy cloth, and now that Joann's is going out of business, I don't think I can actually find fabric on the cheap now.
But yeah, thank you guys for talking about this. I've been like, this has been such a privilege and an honor getting to run it. I'm really excited about it. And, obviously I'm at a really interesting point where like I'm trying to digest everything that's happened since it was so recent. But I'm just really pumped for next year and the idea that it can only get better, hopefully.
Yeah, for sure. And I'm excited for next year as well.
Yeah, me too. I'll be.
We'll have a Titan to bring next year. Well,
That's we were
Mm-hmm.
talking about this a little before the podcast, but I think our plan is that everyone's going to bring their own Titan next year, and we're all
especially
Yeah,
John.
especially
John, you
John.
have 12
Yep,
months.
John, you got
My
to.
Reaver in a box, like Jesus.
You can do it.
How long has it been in the box, John?
Oh, dude. When I meet you, like 20, I even met you, so it was like 2016 or something.
I
Jesus
moved out
Christ.
here in 2018,
Oh,
so it
2018,
would have
there we
had to
go.
be up there. Yep.
Oh,
Yeah, so it's like 2017, 2018 is we're in the box.
7 years, John. Come
Yes.
on.
John, you really kind of put your
It's all about
ADHD on
opportunity cost.
display.
Like the time to build and paint the Reaver is like 2 legions or armies.
Dude, just every week select a part, clean it. Every week select if it's a small part, select 2 or 3 small parts. I'll give you the carapace. You need 2 weeks. Just every week
Painting's fine. It's
clean
the
clean
putting
the
it together.
flash.
Like
No, I
the idea of drilling that thing and putting like metal spikes inside to prevent it from falling as like painting is like
Mhm.
no
just
no 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 no.
crazy
You're
to
doing it
me.
wrong. Use wood dowels. Okay,
Oh,
long
see,
wood
there we go.
dowels. That's the cheap
It's not
solution.
just glue. No,
Yeah, exactly. That's it. Yeah, that's where you lost me, man. Not just glue. No, it's too much work.
I swear to God. You guys, come on. It's 7 years. 7 years, John. You can't let it sit there for 7 years.
Don't worry, it's gonna be done in the next LVO. He already promised.
oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Oh my
We have
gosh.
we have a verbal commitment for next LVO.
Hey,
Randy,
Oh,
John,
you need to.
If you get your Reaver Titan done, I will get a Warlord Titan done, and
oh
I'm
my
gonna make it for
gosh.
the Ordo Sinister.
Oh my
Heard it.
So
gosh.
you know how much work that would require of me. I
That's
will
like
do it
yeah.
just for you if you'll get yours done.
Oh my gosh.
Beto will get a Titan too.
Uh
This is all on you, John.
Titan
Don't
building
even,
days.
don't even wish evil upon me. I don't want to have to actually build a Titan that, or if buy one for much better. It's too much, just too
Oh,
much.
you're so happy to give John advice on his Titan. As soon as you think about getting your own, you're like too
No,
much.
no, it's about
Listen, John has
timing and
owned a Titan for
schedule.
7 years.
This is true. This is true.
Selfish
Oh
host.
man.
All right, guys. Well, I think that's a good endpoint for tonight. Thank you all for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. Yeah, if you did go to LVO, let us know your thoughts here as well as in the surveys that Reed sent out. And as always, let us know if you have anything that you'd like us to talk about. Any suggestions for the Titan Legion I should paint my Warhound up? Let me know. And we'll see you all next time. Adios.
Run.
Bye, guys.
Peace.